Hello, everyone. This is Professor Steve Martin, Criminal Justice Professor at DMAC, and we are going to cover Module 2 PowerPoints, and this is going to be Chapter 5, Police Operational Issues, and this is for CRJ 111, Police and Society. So thumbing through here, we will talk about a lot of different things regarding policing today. One of those things is going to be the issue of stress in policing and how to cope with it. And when we're talking about stress and the sources of that, of course, there are the external factors, internal factors, stress resulting from some of the things that the police are tasked with, and also from the individual who is the officer. Stressors that cause some of the stressful situations that we have. Obviously, the nature of the job. It is a life-threatening job on occasion. You tend to be socially isolated from everybody else. It's always been this us versus them attitude. Stress resulting from the organization itself. Functional stress on the job. Again, doing the types of things that the police often do result in stressful situations, from the type of clientele you deal with to other parts of the criminal justice system. Stress resulting from personal issues, maybe issues at home, marital strife, problems with children, maybe financial problems, substance abuse issues, those types of things. Physiological stress, maybe resulting from an injury or maybe a health problem that the officer is experiencing or someone in their family could be experiencing, to the psychological stress. Maybe bouts with depression or maybe even substance abuse issues. These are the types of things that tend to generally cause stress in the lives of police officers. Some of the coping methods that one could choose. Obviously, getting out in front of the problem, being proactive, action-oriented, versus just trying to avoid the issue altogether, putting your head in the sand, that type of thing. Some of the impacts of stress are going to be the physiological things, the high blood pressure, the cardiac problems, the cancers, those types of things. The cognitive things that maybe slow down reaction times and don't make you as perceptive as you should be as an officer, and some of the behavioral reactions too. Maybe coping mechanisms that aren't so healthy, for instance, substance abuse, drug use and alcohol use, extramarital affairs, more of the deviant type of behavior that we hear officers committing once in a while, but yet they're in response to supposedly stressful situations that they're encountering at work. And again, some coping strategies that the textbook talked about. Obviously, number one, try to address the issue, hopefully through healthy avenues. Seek counseling or help either within or outside the department, and try to increase your ability to cope with those things. The text then moved on and talked a little bit about something that causes officers a lot of stress, and that's the idea of police pursuits, whether to, whether not to, and the discretion used regarding those. Obviously, especially if somebody's injured or killed in a police pursuit, there's a lot of media coverage of those, and many times the police aren't put in a favorable light regarding those. The public asks, well, why was the officers even pursuing this person? They were only wanted for a traffic violation, or maybe they were suspected of driving while intoxicated or something like that. So many times the officer's discretion and judgment are called into scrutiny here by the media and the general public. Some of the things that we're most concerned about as far as police pursuits, is it worth pursuing? What's the reason for the pursuit? The officer's ability to maintain a pursuit. Is it somebody that has very little experience on the street, or is it someone that is experienced in pursuits and law enforcement in general. What's the road traffic pedestrian conditions like? Is it in a school zone? Is it 3 o'clock in the afternoon versus 3 o'clock in the morning on an interstate? These are all things that are called into question as well. The weather conditions. Were we having snow? Was it icy? Was it dry? Those types of things also come into play. How close was available help for the officer that initiated or maintained the pursuit? Your department policy. What does department policy dictate regarding high-speed pursuits? It's kind of interesting. I know Des Moines Police Department's been in the news of late where they have revised some of their pursuit policies to take away some of the discretion of the officers and try to lay out a more definitive type of policy, regarding when they should and shouldn't pursue. And again, discretion sometimes is a better part of valor. Discretion to call off or never start a chase, or discretion to continue that chase. And sometimes developing policies that make it much clearer also on when the officers should or shouldn't pursue could also alleviate some stress. Or others could see it as more of a stressor because they're limiting my authority to use discretion. So it's a double-edged sword in a way, but departments are starting to look at maybe revising some policies to make it a more restrictive call on when you can and cannot pursue. Other things you're going to take into account, the individual's driving behavior. Did they pose an immediate danger to the motoring public? Or was there a minimal amount of threat to the public during that time period? And also the likelihood of catching this person. A lot of times the public will say, well, the police got the individual's license number. Why couldn't they just discontinue the pursuit and, look them up later? Well, it's a possibility that maybe the person that owned the vehicle wasn't driving it. And maybe there's a possibility that the individual won't be identified even from the registered owner. So sometimes it is very beneficial to catch the person, behind the wheel at the time. Obviously, this is a biggie, liability. Usually when somebody's injured or killed in a high-speed pursuit, and that's up to and including the individual that is fleeing from the police, surviving family members, or maybe innocent bystanders that were injured or family members killed in these pursuits will sue the law enforcement agency or agencies involved in the pursuit over some of these issues that we talked about earlier. The discretion, should they or should they not have been pursuing? And obviously they're seeking, in many cases, monetary damages and changes to police policies and so forth, so this doesn't happen to anybody else. But one of the big things that law enforcement circles often discuss is the issue of liability and having to pay huge settlements to plaintiffs because of police actions. So that's something we're always training for, and is always in the back of our minds is what are we carrying as far as liability. And some solutions to high-speed chases. I think we've always been looking for that magic pill, if you will, or the magic bullet that is going to end these things peacefully, safely, with a minimal amount of injury or death. And so we're always looking at technology. Obviously, spike strips have been around for probably 15 years at least now, where we have the controlled deflation of tires after they hit a strip that's got hollow spikes in it that come out and stay in the tire. Obviously, you got to be in a position to deploy those, well ahead at a choke point or whatever during a pursuit, where you have a choke point in traffic where you can deploy those. They've helped take care of some of them. They don't end all of them. Something that disrupts the electrical system of the car is, I think, something that might have some relevancy at some point down the road. The pit maneuver, where you actually have a squad car come into contact with the suspect vehicle, spinning them out of control and bringing the pursuit to a stop, is something that is used from time to time. But again, you have to be close to this vehicle and be in a position to go ahead and deploy that technique. Some other technologies out there, um, like other ways to um, slow down or stop a vehicle, either electronically or mechanically. Helicopters being used for pursuits is another one, and maybe one of the safest ones, where you could follow somebody from above without them maybe actually knowing it, and while ground units are following nearby. For those locations that have access to things like that, that's wonderful. Obviously, in the more rural areas of America, even here in Iowa, we don't have access to aircraft where we can just, follow somebody from the air all the time. And again, usually what happens is policies are revised and reviewed on a regular basis to see if there's anything that could be done to limit liability and limit the number of injuries and deaths as a result of high-speed chases. We talk about discretion, police decision making. Again, this is just a huge issue, not only in law enforcement, but all areas of criminal justice. Which calls should we handle first? Which crimes should we, enforce most vigorously? And it always comes down to, the police can't really enforce every law and arrest people. We're just not built to do that. So we have to kind of prioritize what it is that we want to enforce and we want to focus on. And that varies from community to community and state to state. What do we want to focus on? Drunk drivers? Do we want to focus on traffic? Those types of things. What different ideas go into this decision making on what we're going to focus on. It just kind of depends on the agency and maybe sentiments from the public too, and maybe even political sentiment of what the police should be doing. When we talk about police violence, that's something, police brutality is something you hear in the news on a fairly regular basis, where the police are accused of using too much force against someone, and you hear of officers being either civilly sued, criminally charged, or possibly both. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. Obviously, the nature of the situation is one of the things. The number of officers at the scene versus the number of suspects, the nature of the suspects. Were they middle school kids, or was it a drunken fight at a bar? All these things go into determining whether or not officers were reasonable under the circumstances. And this is typically referred to as a police use of force continuum, where it illustrates an escalation and de-escalation of force based upon suspects' actions and that sort of thing. But very quickly, as I'm running out of time here, let me just go through this. Recognized officer presence, people at the scene. Recognize that officers are there, the officer's ability to verbally communicate with people, telling them to stop doing what they're doing and to start complying with officers' commands. This works about 95% of the time, actually. The physical contact, from the laying of hands on someone to actually using an impact weapon, or maybe an electronic immobilization device such as a taser, those types of things, to pepper spray. And it kind of works into the more serious physical contact as well, like I was talking about with these weapons. And then obviously up to and including deadly force, the use of a firearm, to stop somebody. And deadly force, just to add, could be something that could be delivered with a medium that would be considered non-lethal force under certain other circumstances. So, but most often we think of deadly force in the use of a firearm. Anyway, that kind of wraps up Chapter 5. I went through that really quickly. I apologize. I'm just limited on time for this. So anyway, stay tuned for Chapter 6.